Most men define a loss as capital depleted. It is merely money gone. I define a loss differently. I define it as tuition paid. If you pay tuition for a high-value lesson but you skip the necessary class, you have bankrupted yourself twice. You lost the capital. Then you lost the education. The market has just delivered you a lesson carved in blood. Only an absolute fool lets that education fade immediately into emotional denial or financial amnesia. To capitalize your losses is not merely to recover the money. It is to turn expensive history into an invaluable, non-negotiable trading policy. The difference between a gambler and a successful operator is stark. A gambler pays a debt and immediately forgets the details. He wipes the slate clean, assumes the market betrayed him, and prepares to make the same wager again tomorrow. A successful operator pays a debt, too. But then he obsessively catalogs the precise error that led to the invoice. He treats the loss as an immediate, involuntary training exercise. Stop mourning the capital. That is a sentimentality you cannot afford. Start dissecting the structure. If you are not learning from the trades that bled you dry, if you are not dedicating more intellectual honesty to your losses than you dedicate to your winners, then you are merely subscribing to future catastrophic failure. You are paying for the same lesson over and over until you are entirely wiped out. That is the fate of the emotional man. The intellectual operator must capitalize the cost. Subscribe now, like this video, and leave a comment. By doing that, you help more people see this message, and you let me know this work is not in vain. We begin with the first principle of capitalization. The loss for the operator is not the point of failure. It is the moment of revelation. 1. The true cost of emotional denial. A loss is only defined as a permanent financial failure when the trader immediately rushes back into the market to get even. This is the most common, most destructive urge known to the trading floor. It is the primitive brain demanding immediate tactical redemption. It is the ego insisting that it must prove itself right now, using the same instrument that humiliated it moments before. The first step in capitalizing a loss is mandatory stoppage. You must walk away from the ticker. You must disengage entirely. If you cannot physically leave the desk, you must at least close the execution window and stare, blankly, at the ceiling. You must recognize that the loss was primarily caused by emotional exposure, not poor entry mechanics. Think on that truth. The entry was often mechanical, perhaps even sensible. The failure was the exit. The failure was the holding. The failure was the decision to stay when the price action demanded departure. This is a psychological debt. Trying to trade your way out of a psychological breakdown is the fastest, straightest path to total ruin. If your mind is contaminated by the panic of the previous defeat, every subsequent action will be a reaction, not a calculation. You will be trading to silence the inner voice of doubt, not trading based on objective market conditions. The cost of denial is exponential. If you refuse to stop, you are telling the market and yourself that the tuition you just paid means nothing. You are guaranteeing that the mistake will be repeated, only with a size that is likely to be larger, because the ego demands a bigger, faster fix. Stop, analyze, acknowledge the emotional cause. Only then can the capital be truly capitalized. 2. The 4 pillars of the post-mortem blueprint. When you approach the scene of the financial crime, the losing trade, your analysis must be mechanical, cold, and utterly detached. This is not a diary entry. It is a forensic accounting inquest. Every losing trade must be immediately documented by answering 4 specific questions. These questions form the pillars of your post-mortem blueprint. They separate the logical operator you should have been from the emotional fool you became in the heat of the moment. The 4 questions are these. A. What was my structural reason for entry? This must be a clear, documented fact. Not a rumor, not a feeling. Was it a clearly defined pivot point? Was it the reversal of the intermediate trend? Was it based on a breakout of a known consolidation range? if you cannot articulate the structural reason you had no business placing the wager. B. What was the precise price-time signal that contradicted my thesis? There is always a moment, a single tick, a specific close, where the market clearly, definitively, told you that your original premise was false. The moment the stock failed to hold the support level you staked your position on, that was the signal. That was the market speaking the truth. You must identify that betrayal point with clinical precision. 2. Why did I fail to exit at that signal? This is the hardest question to answer honestly. This question separates the operator from the amateur. Did you believe the signal was a false breakdown? Did you move your stop loss? Did you look away from the tape? The reason must be identified because the failure to exit is the true point of structural breakdown. D. What single emotion, hope, fear, greed, or complacency, drove the holding decision? You must categorize the psychological failure. It is rarely complex. It is almost always one of the 4 cardinal sins: hope, waiting for the price to return to parity; fear, freezing up and being unable to hit the button; greed, expecting a small loss to turn into a massive reversal profit; or complacency, assuming the position was too secure to fail. Until you have answered these 4 questions, you have merely suffered a loss. You have not capitalized the tuition. 3. Journaling as forensic accounting. Your trade journal is not a diary of your feelings. It is the corporate balance sheet of your operation. Most men record only the P&L, profit and loss. This is useless. You must treat your journal as forensic accounting. You must categorize every loss by type of error. This quantitative grouping is the only way to identify the Achilles heel of your system. Your losses can be grouped into 3 critical categories. First, technical failure. I missed the signal. I read the chart incorrectly. I miscalculated the risk-reward ratio before entry. This is a flaw in mechanical competence. Second, psychological failure. I held too long. I violated the predefined stop. I moved the goalpost mid-trade. This is a flaw in discipline, stemming from emotion. Third, structural failure. I was positioned too large for the market conditions. I traded an illiquid instrument. I traded against the primary trend. The initial premise itself was fundamentally flawed, regardless of execution. Until your losses are quantitatively grouped, until you can look at the last 100 defeats and say, 75% of my maximum drawdowns stem from psychological failure, holding too long. You cannot address the root cause. You are simply treating symptoms. The man who consistently loses due to psychological failure often tries to fix his technical indicators. He changes his moving averages. He tries a new overlay. This is like trying to fix a leaky roof by polishing the front door handle. It is pointless. It is self-deception. The capital lost provides the numerical evidence of your specific individual fragility. Use that evidence as the foundation for your new policy. 4. The criticality of the small error. This is perhaps the most profound lesson the market imparts, and it is entirely ignored by the small-time amateur. The market does not care about the size of your stake. It cares only about the purity of your adherence to principle. A failure in discipline on a 5-share trade is structurally identical to a failure in discipline on a 50,000-share trade. The loss, however small, capitalizes you by proving that your rules are permeable. If you allow yourself to violate a protective stop for $100, the lesson learned by your subconscious, by the emotional operator, is that you will also violate it for $100,000. The habit of violation is established. The permission is granted. Small losses are where most traders learn their worst habits. They justify the mistake because the monetary cost was cheap. They say, I only lost $50. I learned a valuable lesson. But did you? Did you truly learn the lesson of iron discipline? Or did you just establish the precedent that deviation from the rules is acceptable if the monetary penalty is minor? The small error metastasizes into the catastrophic loss. The capital lost on the minor trade is capitalized only when you recognize that the error is scale independent. You must apply the same surgical rigor to the 5-share loss that you apply to the position that nearly wiped you out. You must learn discipline that is impervious to the size of the position. If you cannot respect your own policy when the stakes are low, you will certainly disregard it when the stakes are dangerously high. The market will always grant you the necessary size to destroy yourself, provided you first establish the necessary bad habit. 5. Identifying your dominant weakness. Losses expose the inherent weakness in your character that profit so efficiently obscures. When money is flowing in, every man believes he is a genius. Discipline feels easy. Risk seems manageable. When the tide turns, your true nature is revealed. The market uses your losses as a psychological mirror, showing you your specific fragility. If your losses come primarily from holding too long, refusing to sell a collapsing position, your dominant weakness is hope. You are paralyzed by the expectation of a return to a high that may never come again. You are gambling on probability, not reacting to price. If your losses come primarily from being stopped out just before a massive, profitable reversal, your weakness is likely panic or fear. You are cutting positions too shallowly, confusing normal market fluctuation with systemic collapse. You are too jumpy, too eager to liquidate potential before it is proven otherwise. If your losses come from taking small profits only to watch the trade immediately continue its direction for 10 times the gain, your weakness is greed. The irrational fear that a small profit might evaporate, causing you to violate the holding policy. You must convert this specific psychological fragility into a documented trigger warning. For example, my primary loss mechanism is hope. When a position shows 30% drawdown, my standard psychological response is to rationalize reasons to hold. Therefore, I must implement an auto-sell function when I experience 20% drawdown, removing my ability to rationalize. The capital you lost was paid to identify this exact flaw in your operation. Do not waste the payment. It is the most valuable self-knowledge you can acquire. 6. The opportunity cost calculation. This is where true intellectual accounting begins. The amateur calculates his loss as merely the capital subtracted from his account. This is a failure of vision. This is a failure to see the full architecture of the market. The true loss is never just the capital subtracted. It is the compounded loss of opportunity capital. While you were married to that dead trade, while you were rationalizing and holding the collapsing stock, your available capital was locked up. It was shackled to the mistake. It was unable to participate in high-probability setups that were occurring simultaneously in other sectors or other instruments. This opportunity cost is often multiples larger than the actualized dollar loss. Every significant loss must be calculated with this additional crippling factor. You must answer the question, what was the best, most disciplined trade I missed during the time I was married to this mistake? Perhaps you lost $5,000 on a dead position you held for 3 weeks. But during those 3 weeks, a clear, high-probability setup offered the potential for $30,000 on another instrument. Your true loss is $35,000. By calculating the debt this way, by making the loss dramatically larger in your accounting, you elevate the psychological imperative to cut the dead wood immediately. Dead money is a curse. It infects your capacity to see new opportunities, and it ensures that your capital is never deployed efficiently. The capitalization of loss here is the ironclad rule. Free your capital immediately, regardless of the emotional pain of the liquidation, so that your fighting funds are always available for the next high-probability setup. 7. The rule of the 3 repeats. The market is patient, but it is not merciful. If you incur 3 consecutive substantial losses rooted in the same structural error, you are no longer learning. You are addicted to a flawed process. You are demonstrating that the cost of tuition, paid twice, has not altered your behavior. A structural error might be repeatedly trading against the established primary trend. It might be repeatedly chasing parabolic reversals. It might be repeatedly initiating a position too late in the cycle. If the pattern repeats 3 times, you have proven that your current psychological framework is incapable of executing the necessary policy adjustment. The capitalization protocol requires immediate mandatory surgical intervention. You must reduce your trade size by 80%. This is not a suggestion. This is not a choice. It is a necessary, involuntary disciplinary action. You will remain at this drastically reduced size, trading negligible capital, until a documented successful modification to the strategy is achieved. You must execute a string of perfectly disciplined trades at the small size. This size reduction serves 2 purposes. First, it protects your remaining capital from the contagion of bad habits. Second, and more importantly, it forces patience. It forces the operator to value perfection of execution over size of profit. If the market sees you repeatedly striking the same false note, it will exploit that dissonance until you are silenced entirely. The rule of the 3 repeats is your fail-safe mechanism, forcing you to the sidelines until structural sanity is restored. You must prove with reduced capital that you have mastered the lesson. 8. Formalizing the loss tax into policy. Every substantial loss is a tax levied by the market on your specific ignorance. The capital lost is the tax. The new formalized rule derived from the loss is the government policy implemented to prevent recurrence. This policy cannot be a suggestion or a preference. It must be written, dated, and framed as a rigid constraint upon your future actions. Example: you incur a devastating loss of $7,000 because you initiated a substantial position 30 minutes before a major Federal Reserve announcement, and the resulting volatility liquidated you entirely. The $7,000 loss is the tax. The new policy formalized. Policy 4.7. I will never initiate or increase an open position in any instrument 30 minutes before a high-impact news announcement, e.g. FOMC, CPI, NFP, or 30 minutes after the announcement is released, until the market has established a clear post-event direction. This policy is now non-negotiable. The genius of capitalizing a loss is that you are converting ephemeral, spent currency into permanent, protective law. If you suffer a loss due to holding a position overnight and waking up to a massive gap against you, your new policy must restrict all overnight holdings, perhaps demanding the liquidation of 90% of your open risk by the closing bell. Do not accept the loss merely as bad luck. Accept it as the proof that your current policy contained a structural weakness. The loss, in its cold efficiency, pointed out the hole in the fence. The policy is the act of repairing the fence, guaranteeing that the capital paid for the repair. 9. The reality check of price action. The market is the most objective truth-teller on earth. It is utterly disinterested in your feelings, your hopes, or your sophisticated theories. A loss proves that your belief about a stock's future direction was false. Your conviction is meaningless. Your research is invalidated. Your thesis was betrayed. The moment price action contradicted your entry thesis, the trade was fundamentally dead. It was dead regardless of your deep conviction that the stock had to rally because the fundamentals were so strong. Fundamentals are a theory. Price action is reality. The loss capitalizes you by demanding absolute fanatical fidelity to price action rather than wishful projection. The novice operator, when the stock declines, seeks a rationalization. He seeks an external factor, a weak sector, a politician's speech, a rumor, to blame the downturn. The capitalized operator looks only at the ticker. He acknowledges that the price is moving against him, and therefore, he is wrong. The loss is the penalty for arguing with the tape. If the market gives you a clear signal that the risk-reward is now upside down, but you hold out of intellectual stubbornness, the loss is merely the fair price of your arrogance. You paid capital to learn one of the great lessons. The market is never wrong. Individual men, including yourself, are wrong constantly. The policy derived from this capitalization must be simplicity itself. When the price contradicts the premise, the position is liquidated. No discussion, no rationalization, no delay. 10. The Confidence Restoration Protocol. After a major policy-shattering loss, your primary goal is not financial recovery. Your goal is psychological and intellectual restoration. Your confidence in your rules has been shattered, even if you still believe in your analysis. The market has proven that you cannot be trusted to follow your own established methods. The path to recovery is not to recover the lost capital. The attempt to get back to even is the second most destructive urge in trading. Instead, you must embark on the Confidence Restoration Protocol. You must execute 5 consecutive, small, high-probability trades with perfect, flawless discipline. The size of these trades is irrelevant. Trade 20 shares, trade 5 shares. The dollar profit realized is immaterial. What is critical is the perfect execution of your policy. You must enter precisely at the signal. You must place the stop exactly where the policy dictates. You must exit precisely when the profit target is hit, or when the stop is breached. These 5 small, perfect trades are designed solely to rebuild the intellectual confidence necessary to trust your rules when the true opportunity arrives. They retrain the muscle memory. They reinforce the positive neural pathway. I followed my rule, and the result was positive. The major loss was the shock that broke the system. The 5 perfect small trades are the calibration of the instruments. They prove to your emotional self that the mechanical system works, provided the emotional self does not interfere. Only once the emotional self is subjugated and the intellectual confidence is restored through demonstrated discipline can you return to full size. Until then, you are not trading. You are practicing the rules you paid so dearly to acquire. The man who fears losses is a man who fears the truth about his own character. He fears the necessary invoice. The market is the greatest and most expensive school on earth, and the tuition is non-negotiable. It demands payment in cash, and it demands acceptance of the lesson. Your fortune is not determined by how well you manage your winning streaks. Winning streaks obscure weakness. Your future wealth is determined entirely by the intellectual honesty and the structural, permanent policy changes you embrace after your worst defeats. Stop sweeping the dirt under the rug. Stop blaming outside forces for the deficits in your character. The gold, the foundational policies and the self-knowledge required for true, sustained wealth, is found only in the rigorous study of the losses you refuse to accept as finality. The loss is not the end. It is merely the beginning of the next stronger chapter, provided you pay attention to the exact cost of the lesson. Every strategic lesson we've covered today originated in what Jesse Livermore called his market penalty, the costly, expensive education he paid for in real time. In 1923, Edwin Lefebvre documented the entirety of that high-cost instruction in Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. Reading the narrative of the fictionalized Larry Livingston is the ultimate competitive advantage. It allows you to step into a vicarious laboratory, absorbing the hardest learned lessons without committing your own capital to the training ground. Yet translating the intricacies of 1923 Wall Street to the modern markets requires precision. That is why the Max Davidson Annotated edition is the critical component, providing the necessary commentary to apply this foundational wisdom effectively. A link to this essential edition is provided in the description below. You are filling yourself with knowledge, which is excellent. But knowledge alone won't make everyone rich, because not everyone possesses the right foundation. The market is the same for everyone. The only difference lies in the mindset. You can have a perfect trading system, but if you lack discipline and an understanding of your own psychology, that system is worth nothing. I often see a recurring theme in your comments. It is easy to talk about strategy in theory, but when it comes to the actual trade, many struggle with emotions. For those who want to focus on discipline, patience, and self-discovery within trading, I have created a new channel called the Stoic Trader. I believe it will help many of you bridge these gaps. So, if you think this kind of content would be useful to you, go ahead and check it out. The link is, as always, in the description below.